Hey guys, Ezra here, and welcome back to another Ezra review. And on today's video, I want to talk about Squid Game season 3. But as you can tell by the title, I was disappointed by the season. Because the thing is that let's just get straight into it, shall we? So like the first season to me, it feels like a lightning in a bottle, and nothing could beat that. And it came out at the right time in 2021, where everybody is in lockdown in their house. And I think watching Squid Game for the first time is like it's very intriguing because it's a new world that you wanted to know more about. And I think the first season does a great job for building the characters, and the games feels iconic. And naturally, when something is so successful, you're gonna be expecting a sequel. And I was actually looking forward to season 2 and season 3, and I did a review for season 2, and I think that second season was okay. I did enjoy it. But I do think season 3 is a bit of a fumble in a way. I guess like lackluster is like the right word to describe season 3. Like I want to make sure that this season isn't exactly ruining Squid Game or completely like again it's a disappointment for sure, but I do think there is some good moments in the season itself. Like season 2 and season 3 has a really good moment, but obviously this two season doesn't necessarily live up to season 1, because obviously you cannot redo that magic again. So but I do have a trust in the creators, Hwangdonghyuk, and I do think he tries his best to tell the story of like society through our main character Song Gi-hun. um and as for season 3, let's just start right away with Song Gi-hun's character. Like the way they handle his character in this season, I think they did a pretty good job. Because for the most part, I think you are expecting Song Gi-hun to take down the Squid Game, the system, but that's not happening, because eventually the whole season is about him regaining his belief and faith again. Because after he fumbles so hard in season 2, where he tries to take down the game's master, by basically gathering up some players and then try to fight the pink soldiers, and that plan failed, and then he lost his best friend Jungbei. um and in this season, they basically try to Gihan is basically trying to rebuild his own faith again. And I don't think that's like the whole purpose of Song Gi-hun's character, where he sort of win in the end, but I guess he won against Inho, the frontman, played by Leebyunghun, because Leebyunghun's character is trying to build his character to be like him, the frontman, and then maybe try to succeed at him, but that's not happening, because Song Gi-hun still believe that he's a good person, that he's gonna be playing fair, and that if he's going to kill people, he's gonna kill them in the game, based on the rules. So that's exactly what he does. Even though there's some contrived moment with his characters, where in the end, where it's just between him and McG Cohen, Lee Myung-gi, characters. Like it's between Myung-gi and Song Gi-hun, and then they have like a battle in the end, because they try to save the baby, but it seems like Myung-gi just becoming a psychopath in the end, and I feel like his character is kind of like tiptoeing between good and bad in a way. So it's kind of like, I don't know. Like I think the way they portray the character is like, it makes sense that he tries to become a psychopath in the end, but again, it is not as strong as the season 1 finale, where we see Song Gi-hun finding his best friend, Cho Sang-woo. And I think that connection just wasn't really there. So I'm not really that engaged. And I do think there is some contrived moment where they have to press the button in the floor so they can start the game, because every single time they move like a different platform, like a Sky Squid Game, then usually they have to press a button, and then that's where the game start. But they didn't press the button, and then Myung-gi dies, so it's about Gi-han and the baby. And since like one of them has to die, basically Gi-han sacrificed himself in the end. And I do think they handled that moment pretty well. I did enjoy that. I think I did tear up a bit, because I feel sad that our main character dies in the end. But at least he died believing that he's a good person, and then trying to prove to the system that, hey, like humans are not, we are not horses. Not all of us are greedy and selfish. And I think Song Gi-hun does win against the frontman, even though he doesn't necessarily take down the Squid Game system. As much as I wanted him to do to do that, I don't think that Song Gi-hun's character was handled pretty well this season. But I think, yeah, besides his character, I do think that the rest of them of the characters are pretty lackluster in a way. There is some one good character, which is like the mother character. I forgot her name, but essentially, like the mother character are the best side character in this season because you feel so emotional. Like I feel like so emotionally, invested with the mother character because at the moment after they complete the fourth game, which is like a hide and seek game, she basically killed her own son because like her son was failing to kill anybody in the game. So obviously he's gonna die, and then the mother decided to kill his own son because he's about to kill another person named Junghee, I think, which is basically has a baby in the game, and the mother decided to, to kill his own son, and this becomes like a very devastating event in episode 3 where she basically tell Gihan to protect like the baby and the mother. That's basically his final promise to the mother, and then eventually it was revealed that the next morning she already committed suicide. And I think on one hand it's like a callback to the husband death in the first season, but this one in my opinion is felt much more stronger because you can actually felt that this character is precious and it's like a mother figure towards pretty much everybody in the to our main characters in a way. Like he's just like a really kind person, and really care for everybody, becoming a mother figure towards like most characters in this game, and it's like, yeah, when you lost her, it's like I feel like the impact of the losses, in the characters. And I do think that the first three episodes has like some of the big losers in the characters. One of them is like the transgender characters that basically got stabbed in the hide and seek game, and it was even sadder because like he's actually finding an exit, but he decided to go back and get the mother and the mother of the baby, so they can all escape together. But sadly, she got killed, and yeah, it's like I think in the first three seasons we already lost our favorite characters, or at least the character that I actually care about. So by the time you get to the rest of the episodes, I don't really care that much about like the other characters, to be honest. I think I just don't have this big connection between the players, unlike in the first season where you do get behind the scenes of like several of our players, so you do care about them throughout the show, and the show are pretty consistent for keeping our main characters alive until the very end, and it feels heartbroken by the time you lose them. And I think this season does have that, with the transgender character that got killed. I was sad that she died, and then the mother character also, when she committed suicide, that was also really sad, but the other characters after that, I don't really care that much. I guess there's like the mother character that was like still around in episode 4. I think I care for her a little bit more, because like, she has a baby and seems to be like Kim Jun-hee, Jun-hee's character. I think like I care about her, but not as much as like the other two characters that already died. And this created like an effect that was actually a bit disappointing for me because I don't really feel that engaged with the game, because the next game is about like a jumping rope or something like that, which like visually is like a really really cool game. I think it was really well constructed, but I do think because I didn't really care that much about the characters, I feel like less intense in a way. I think I'm kind of rooting for Gihan to go back and save Junhee, because I do care for her character, but like in the fourth game, in the hide and seek game, she basically broke her ankle, and that's why she can't jump the rope, and eventually that basically sealed her fate. But Gihan managed to bring the baby to the other side, so the baby is safe. And yeah, besides that one intense moment, I don't really care that much about the other characters. I do think they are kind of disappointing. Because I do think hwangdonghyuk basically fumbles some of the characters here. Like, for example, there is this one character named Minsu, right? And I don't think in season 2 they try to build Minsu to be like, oh, like eventually Minsu's gonna step up and become brave and then saving everybody else, But I do think it kind of fumbles because they kill like this one girl in season 2 named Sammy. I think like when they kill Sammy in season 2, I was disappointed because I think it's a huge fumble, because I do think that is that character has potential for progressing Minsu character. But in season 3, Minsu was basically reduced to like a drug addict. And I think that was like really, really disappointing because you could build his character to be like, eventually overcoming his his cowardness, you could say that, and then eventually becoming brave enough, and then maybe fight with Song Gi-hun to save the baby. But like that doesn't happen. Like he was reduced to a drug addict, and he just dies in the end of the final game, basically the Squid Game. And I do think that's disappointing because I feel like you have a clear build up for the characters and you don't really do anything with it. And especially killing Sammy in season 2 was a huge fumble. Same thing when they kill Thanos in season 2. I think it's also a huge fumble because I think Thanos is a really fun villain, and now we got stuck with Thanos, like basically, I guess, like friend, or like right hand man in a way. And I think he's not as good as Thanos, and you kind of miss Thanos in this season, and I think a lot of people have the same feeling here about Thanos' character, because I remember when season 3 was releasing the trailer, and like a lot of people are releasing an AI video basically revealing that, oh, Thanos is alive, somehow. Like it's pretty clear to me that a lot of people really love Thanos, even though that he's a villain, but I think he's an entertaining character, and I think killing him in season 2 is a huge fumble, So like there is that two deaths that I think is a huge fumble, and you kind of felt the effect here in season 3. Minsu's character reduced to nothing. When he dies, I don't feel bad at all. Leebyunghun's character, the Bitcoin guy, that basically scam his fans. I do think he's like kinda interesting, but at the same time, the character is kind of like fumbling between good and bad and greed. So I think in the end, it kind of makes sense that he became a psychopath, But I feel like, I don't know, man. Like the character was supposed to be switching a lot, and I just don't know how to feel about Myunggi's character. I'm like, am I supposed to root for him? Is it like there is a character development for him, or he's just a bad guy? Like I don't understand this, because they keep changing side, and I just like, dude, pick one and commit, please. Like I just don't get it why Hwangdonghyuk decided to write the characters that way, where it's like tiptoeing between good and bad. So in the end there, I don't exactly know how to feel about Myunggi's character, the Bitcoin character. I'm like, what am I supposed to feel here? And I guess in the end he became a total psychopath, so we can like root for Song Gi-hun's character, so we can clearly root for our main characters. And yeah, I guess that's that, but also like I kind of feel like, okay, it kind of feels forced for me. I know that people will say that there is some build up with his characters that I feel like he's like, again, because he was like tiptoeing between a good person and then turning into like a greedy person in the end. I feel like in the end there, even though that I think the actor does a great job, I think the performers are absolutely fantastic, I do think the character was like, I don't know how to feel about the characters. At the end of the day, when he dies, it's like, yeah, I mean, like, that's too bad, I guess. I don't feel bad at all, and I think that's one I think is a very lackluster game for this season. I think the visual of the game are really, really good and really intense. I think the hide and seek game is probably the most intense one, because I think there is some characters that I actually care about. But by the time you get to the 5th game and the 6th game, you're basically stuck with a bunch of villainous character that you don't even know who they were. They're just like random players, and they were greedy and they want the money, and that pretty much become it, in the end of the game there. And I think because there is lack of this personal connection between our main character Song Gi-hun and the players, I don't really feel that intense or feel that engaged with the game, and I think that becomes really, really disappointing. The other massive disappointing thing that I want to talk about is actually the detective character. I think I have no idea why Hwang Dong-hyuk decided to do this to the detective character, like Hwang Jun-ho's character. I think the Detective Jun-ho was built up to be this like secondary protagonist, along with Song Gi-hun, and I was actually excited to see the two of them team up in season 2. But for 2 seasons, the detective's character is just literally lost in the sea looking for an island. It's like, hey, anybody know where the island was? Because we were lost, and then Captain Park, which is basically the villain in his storyline, was like, yeah, basically misleading the characters. So I was like, okay, sure, I guess, but there is nothing substantial happening with the detective's character. And because I do think in the first season, his character was really cool, because like when everybody's playing Squid Game, the child's game basically, and then the detective is basically playing Among Us in season 1, which I absolutely love that. And it kind of ended in a disappointing way, where he got shot in the end by the frontman, which revealed to be his brother. And everybody felt the same way, when they wrote season 1. It's like the detective is a cool character. His plot is really cool. You get to see the behind the scene of Squid Game, but the conclusion was disappointing because he just got shot and then like falls down into the sea, and that's it. You never see him again. But I think with season 2 and season 3, I was like, okay, like maybe finally we get to see this like definitive conclusion for his character. But nothing happened, and nothing interesting happened with his character, because his character is just like looking for an island, getting lost for 2 seasons. And by the time you get to the final season, where he finally gets to the island, he spent like 3 scenes in the island in there, where he tries to get to his brother, the front man, and then they barely exchange any dialogue. There's barely any conversation whatsoever. Because I do think that from season 2, they try to build up this confrontation between Hwang Junho and Hwang In-ho, the front man. And I was expecting to see this, like, at least some confrontation between the two characters, but you don't really get that in season 3. And I think that was the most disappointing aspect of the detective's character. And I do think that his character are completely wasted for 2 seasons. Like, why would you bring him back? Why do you even bother bring him back? Like, he might as well die in the season in season 1, because again, the way they handle his character are really, really disappointing. And I think it was a huge fumble, because it could be like a really interesting conversation or like confrontation between the two brothers, and I was actually really looking forward for that, but nothing happened. Like I think he saw his brother, the front man, and then he says like, why are you doing this? And like the brother doesn't say anything, and then like they just peace out. So like that's it. They basically have the same screen time for like 10 seconds, just like in the end of season 1. So it was really, really weird. I have no idea why Hwangdonghyuk decided to handle the detective's character to be this way, where I think his character was like really, really, I don't know. I think at the start it was interesting, because I was really looking forward to see what he's going to do in the storyline. But seeing the conclusion, it was disappointing, because he doesn't do anything much. I guess he does bring the Coast Guard to the island, and at least the island get destroyed, so I guess there is that. But besides that one big moment, it was disappointing in terms of his personal character, because his character doesn't do anything substantial in the storyline. I would even argue that you could remove the characters entirely, and then the story for the most part will be the same, unless, well, I guess, except I guess the island doesn't get destroyed in the end, because he does call the Coast Guard, and then the Coast Guard find, the island there. But ultimately, there is nothing substantial with his character, and I think overall it's really disappointing the way they handled the detective's character. I think they really fumbled that. I guess in the end he does receive the baby and the money from the baby, because the baby technically won the game. But that's it, nothing substantial from his character. It was disappointing. Yeah, overall, man, season 2 is just a really disappointing season, but before I end the review, I want to add some positive aspect, I guess, a little bit, which is Song Gi-hun's daughter. We see Song Gi-hun's daughter in the end of season 3, and I think that's really, really nice, because I do feel bad for her daughter, that Gi-hun basically decided to sacrifice, reuniting with his daughter, and then eventually the frontman's character basically give the winning prize money to her daughter. And I think that's a really good way to basically conclude the Song Gi-hun's character and her daughter as well, because like the reason why Gi-hun enters the Squid Game is because of her daughter, and because of Gi-hun's mother as well. And I do think that's a nice conclusion, that her daughter basically, receiving Gi-hun's prize money, and then like his jumpsuit as well, his tracksuit essentially. So yeah, I think in the end there, Hwang In-ho's character, the front man, basically kind of like, I guess, kind of changed in the end, where he basically realized that Song Gi-hun doesn't become like him in the end. So I think he has some, maybe some change of heart. I'm pretty sure that he's still working for the Squid Game organization. He's still the front man, but it seems like he has some regrets, or I guess like has some change of heart maybe. Like I have no idea, but ultimately his character is kind of been affected by Song Gi-hun's death. So there's that. But in the end here, which I think is quite surprising, because the end took place in Los Angeles, we see an American recruiter playing Takchi with a homeless man in Los Angeles, and it was revealed that this recruiter was actually played by Cate Blanchett. And I was super surprised to see Cate Blanchett here in the end. I was like, whoa, like what is happening here? And I was immediately I was like, oh, I think this ending here leads directly to the American version of Squid Game, because if you guys don't know, there is gonna be an American version of Squid Game, and it's gonna be developed by David Fincher. Now, David Fincher, you might know him from Seven, Fight Club, Gone Girl, Alien 3, which is not his best movie, but still, it was his movie. So yeah, David Fincher is a great director, like a very, very talented filmmaker. So I do have hope that with David Fincher in helm of the American version of Squid Game. So there's that. But I do feel like this ending here kind of feels like Netflix doesn't want Hwangdonghyuk to conclude the storyline, so he just like he came up with this ending, I guess, to lead to the American version of Squid Game. So instead of like a remake of like an Americanized version of Squid Game, this is gonna be took place in the same universe as as this show was. And I think season 4 is gonna be the American storyline with David Fincher, because I think the series was supposed to be filmed maybe this year. Like I have no idea about the detail, but it was confirmed that yes, David Fincher will be directing or creating the American version of Squid Game. And I think that's gonna be the season 4 in the future, where we see a brand new characters, and maybe the frontman character Leebyunghun's character could came back in season 4 and will remain as the frontman there, which I think it was like, yeah, okay, sure, cool, you can keep him around. But I feel like in the end there's like, okay, do we need an American version of Squid Game? I feel like this is like the way for Netflix to try to milk the property of Squid Game. And I think, again, even though I was like disappointed by season 3, I do think that Hwang Dong-hyuk was able to complete it the season in a good way, and basically tying up everything in a loose end here. Well, even though that I think some of them are like luster, I do think that it does completed Song Hyun's characters, and I think it has completed his storyline at the very least, even though the Squid Game is still around. So I think, yeah, I don't know, it was kind of disappointing, to be honest. Yeah, guys, this is my review for Squid Game season 3. So let me know in the comment section below, like what do you guys think about season 3? Are you guys like me finding this season to be disappointing or lackluster, or are you someone who actually loved this season? Then let me know your opinions in the comment section below, and let me know what you guys think about David Fincher's directing an American version of Squid Game. And I think with with the ending here in Los Angeles, where we see Cate Blanchett's character, I think Cate Blanchett will definitely come back in season 4 here. Like how do you guys think? How do you guys feel about the continuation of Squid Game, but it's gonna be the American version? Like how do you guys feel about that? Let me know your opinions about that in the comment section below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to guys leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the video to show stuff. Stay tuned for more movie reviews in the futures. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys in the next one then. Bye.